I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, feeling so very thankful to be welcoming Laura Moseley to Grief and Rebirth podcast for the 12th inspiring interview in the Grief and Rebirth podcast Rebirth Series. Laura, who will be speaking to us from Madison, Indiana, is a single mom of 3, a grandmother, and the courageous survivor of more than 23 years of both sexual and domestic abuse. She is currently involved with social services works. She is a domestic violence advocate. She's a public speaker, and she also has a blog called The Walking Wounded. Laura describes the walking wounded as victims of domestic abuse. Domestic violence victims and survivors hide their pain behind smiles, and they hide their bruises behind well-placed garments and accessories. They live their lives in such constant chaos that mental health professionals have reported that their brain scans look almost identical to those in the military who have experienced and survived combat situations. Full disclosure, I very much resonate with Laura and her story because I grew up in a home filled with trauma and pain of domestic violence and abuse. During my adult years, I volunteered for and was trained to answer calls coming into the hotline of a battered women's service, which provided me with quite an education on this subject. I'm looking forward to talking with Laura about her heart-wrenching story of trauma and pain, how her trauma and pain transformed into a remarkable story of healing and rebirth, and the way she now inspires others to begin their own healing journeys. Laura, I am so glad to welcome you to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate you letting me be on here.
Oh, I'm just so delighted. And I think we are going to not only educate and enlighten and probably inspire a lot of people, because this is an important conversation that a lot of people
really
are
is
not aware of. So let's begin. And I am like so with you, and as I interview you, I mean, like it's triggering memories like crazy of my own background and my own life. Please tell us about your life before you began to experience both domestic and sexual abuse, and share how you met your husband.
Gotcha. Again, my name is Laura Moseley. I am 48 years old. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, to 2 loving parents that are still married, still very much in love. I had a great childhood. My parents would describe me probably as spirited, but I was a tomboy, got into trouble a lot, had to push the envelope. I still do as an adult, but, I loved learning. I loved meeting people and talking to people, even as a young child. And I loved writing. I would write stories. I would make up newspapers. I was going to be a journalist when I was in high school. And when I met my husband, my abuser, I was a senior in high school. We both worked at a plant nursery.
You were really young. You were so young.
I was. It was getting close to graduation. Met him then. My then boyfriend at the time worked there. He decided to break up with me and be real dramatic with it right before prom. So my best girlfriend and I went to prom together, and afterwards, graduated, and I started talking, more and more to the man that would become my husband, and found him to be very delightful. He's very articulate. He was very funny. Didn't have much money, so I would, share my lunch with him on weekends and things like that. And we just got to be friends. And then he decided to ask me out on a date, and it went from there. So he's, good looking guy, again, charming, didn't think anything of that. I was raised to believe the best, you got to find the best in people. And so that's what I did, because he didn't show me anything other than,
that
what a great person. Yeah.
Right,
that he
right.
was.
Did he have anger? I learned that when I learned when I was studying to man the hotline. I learned that a lot of people who are so abusive like this, they have very bad anger management issues. Did he have those issues from his childhood, his upbringing?
He did, of course, not anything I really learned about until
You
after
don't
we were
learn
married.
until you're getting blasted with it, but
Right.
right.
But he was raised by a single mother, that I was very close to throughout, my entire married life. But she was a product of domestic violence. Her husband was very abusive. And when she divorced him, my abuser was 5 years old. So you're thinking, oh, he couldn't have seen much. He probably saw a lot more and absorbed a lot more than,
In
people
his very
realize.
formative years too.
Right. And so he did have anger issues. He came from a broken home. He did, when he was a teenager, he really struggled with drug usage. Again, didn't find this out until after I married him. But he didn't seem to have it then, so I wasn't as concerned. But his addiction issues kind of followed through our whole entire marriage as well, which kind of ran parallel with the abuse.
Yeah.
I think, if you abuse, you can abuse and be addicted to substances, you can abuse and be addicted to control. And I feel like those were parallel. But yeah, he did have anger issues. He got suspended in school for fighting and things like that. And I feel like that kind of triggered, his
And
fuel.
today, with what you know, those would have been red flags for you.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk about red flags later, but my first husband was also abusive. My father was abusive, and my second husband, not at all, because I went to therapy and I healed a lot. But it's today I know better. And we'll talk about what those red flags are that people should be aware of when they're dating someone, to say,
Exactly.
this is. So could you describe how domestic violence and sexual abuse impacted you during your marriage, and share how your kids were affected both physically and emotionally by what was happening in their home? Just like your ex was affected by what happened in his home.
Absolutely. When we first got married, well, we found out we were pregnant pretty early on. So we got married pretty quickly and then moved in with his mom, who also, single mom, tried to control every situation. I understand. I'm a single mom now. I get that to a certain degree, but, so there was a lot of conflict there.
Well, he probably had anger management issues with her too. Not
He
only
did.
he that growing up, but he was mad at her too. He had a lot to displace onto you.
Yeah, a lot of it. So, he didn't start, we would start off having disagreements just like every newly married couple would have. But he took it to a physical level when our oldest child was 18 months old. And he hurt me, and I forgave him just by not acknowledging that, because he didn't acknowledge it. So, just trying to move forward in my marriage, not make a big deal. Maybe I was making more of a big deal about it than I thought. So, and this continued, and it was just different cycles of verbal, emotional, physical, and later on financial, which a lot of people don't realize is an abuse, spiritual. Abuse.
In other words, he withheld money from you.
Yes. Yeah. We had a joint account, so he would, he kept telling me I was so good with money. I needed to make sure the bills are paid. And that was what I was doing. And, I'm trying to give him and myself an allowance, so we can stay on track. And then I was the one withholding money when I'm trying to get the bills paid. So then he would take out an enormous amount of money and overdraw us or whatever. So yeah, it was a lot of control there. Spiritual abuse. He didn't want me going to church. I was raised in the Catholic Church. And he moved us, 450 miles away from my family. So that's how I stayed close to them, as I went to church every Sunday, or tried to, and was guilted and,
that's another form of abuse, because they take you. My father disowned me for many years. They take you away to punish my mother. So they take the support. So your church was your support. He had to take that away from you. So he could control you more.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was just constant ongoing cycles of that. And just in all that coercion, making me feel like I was crazy for, trying to maintain who I was and make sure my family was successful. And it was just insane, the cycle, and not even realizing I was being abused and not realizing that was a cycle. So once you learn or you realize, oh my gosh, am I being abused? I don't know. And then you start reading about it and noticing, wow, this is a cycle. It amps up. We have an explosion, and then everybody's oh so sorry, and it just circles back from there, and you just don't realize it until you do, and then you can't unsee that anymore.
Right.
So,
can I ask you what he did sexually? Would he like?
He wanted to have sex all the time. So if I was not willing to do that, if I was like, oh, I can't, I'm not feeling well. Oh, I have to get up at 3 a.m., let's do this later. No, it was his way or the highway. Also, when I was in high school, when I was 16, a former boyfriend had raped me, and I never really told anybody about that. So once Facebook suggested this person be my friend one day, and I kind of freaked out, and I had to tell him. I didn't keep anything from him. And once I told him, he was like, oh, wow, did you deserve it? What were you wearing? And I'm like,
oh my
what?
God.
Because I told him what happened. I told him what he did, that I never told my parents. So then he would try to take advantage of me in the way that I was raped, which was not something I ever wanted to do. And he did it. He got me basically buzzed, almost drunk, and did what he wanted. While I'm crying and begging him not to. So what a lot of people don't realize is rape is very real inside of a marriage. No is no. It does not matter if you're in a committed relationship. If you say no and they coerce you or they force you, that's rape.
How about your kids? How were they affected by all of this?
When they were young and naive, probably 5 and less, he was just the best dad. He had the ability to be when he wanted to be. But once they started becoming more self-aware, then he started getting physically and emotionally and verbally aggressive with them. And it bothered me that he would do things to me in front of them. Because if he wanted to start an argument, I'm like, okay, let's go to our bedroom and we can talk there. I didn't want to have any sort of disagreement in front of my kids. I mean, I think kids need to know that parents don't always agree, but not to that extent. So, no, it was just another show of power. And then once they became 10 and became, very self-aware, very independent, then he would almost like punish them for trying to be who they were, instead of, working with me, working with us both, trying to parent. So they did, I feel like they got a lot of physical, more emotional and verbal, but I tried to not leave them alone with him because I didn't want him to do anything. But you can't not, leave a child with another parent, forever. Sometimes you have to leave the house or they'd get home before me or whatever, and he'd be there. So he would do things to them without my knowing. And I found out later on.
Are they okay? Are they okay now?
I mean, they're in therapy, and things like that.
They're in therapy. I that saved my life. I have to tell you. With I'm one of 3, and I'm the one who had the most therapy. And that's why I'm so passionate about this healing podcast, because it changed my life, and it sounds like it's helped you also, and it's helping your kids. And I tell people all the time, you can change the dynamic, but you have to do the work. And when you're talking about the fact of the cycles of abuse, that's called the honeymoon period, right? So would he, so I know my mother used to get jewelry.
I did too.
You got jewelry.
Jewelry, flowers, dinner, occasionally like concert tickets or an event ticket. I have all this jewelry in my jewelry box that I have such bad memories of, that I'm really really thinking of just selling it all.
I probably wise to do, and get yourself something that makes you happy.
Exactly.
You know, right?
Exactly.
It's your time now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everyone is listening to this and wondering, Laura, how you found the courage and where you found the support to leave this toxic relationship. So could you please share your healing journey with us? It takes so much courage to
Absolutely.
pull out. I mean, you probably had to plan it and do different things. What did you do?
Well, he and I separated about 4 times before the final separation. I think in like 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. I think it was 2010. I was watching an Oprah Winfrey documentary about bride burning. I mean, but they talked about domestic abuse right before they launched into that. And I was at home sick. Either myself was sick or I was with a sick child. Can't remember exactly, but I watched this whole thing, and that's the point where the light bulb like came on above my head. Am I being abused? I think I'm being abused. And I started reading about it, and because I always thought there was something, maybe he was bipolar, maybe he was, borderline personality, wasn't sure. But he always referenced it was my fault. So I did a lot of soul searching too. But the final
Well,
episode,
one of the things that they do is they make you crazy. They make you
they do
doubt your own. They make you crazy. They make you doubt your
gaslighting.
reality, right?
Yeah,
They're constantly
absolutely.
attacking you. They're pulling you away from your support systems and everything, and it's all you. It's never them.
Absolutely.
Huh.
So once the final episode happened in September of 2017, a year prior to that, I had to start losing weight. I had needed a gallbladder surgery. I had to eat fat free because I didn't have insurance at the time. So I was losing weight. I was starting to feel better, which is always good, when they're sitting there constantly making you physically and emotionally sick anyway. So I'd go to the gym and he'd follow me. He stalked me, just to make sure because I was cheating on him constantly, according to him. I don't know when I would have had time to do that, but okay. So, I had to go out of town for a business trip. So he was torturing my children while I was gone, even though I took them to my mother-in-law's house. She sent them back home
Oh
because,
my God.
yeah, it was a big mess. So I came back home and I said, I can't do this anymore. Well, of course, then, we had a big blow up. He was, oh, so sorry. We're going to work on this. We're going to get back to the way that it was. I just went ahead and said, okay, but I was planning on leaving because I couldn't do it anymore. It was making me to the point where I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping well. And, it was affecting my work life too, my ability to provide for my family. So, the day prior, he shot at me. And the
Shot
reason
at
he
you
shot at me with a gun,
with a
or really
gun?
with a
Really?
gun.
Oh my
Mhm.
God. So you had a gun in the house.
Yes. And we both have guns. So that's, was not a big deal, but he was just so angry because I hadn't called him to tell him I called in sick to work. I just went after I got the kids off to work and school. I went back to bed because I felt terrible. And then I went to the doctor, and then I realized I had missed calls from him. So I called him. He trudged me back down to the doctor's office, made them verify why I was there, what I was there to be seen
Oh
for.
my
That
God.
was the most embarrassing thing. So when we got back home, he was angry, was trying to make a show a force, and shot at me. He didn't hit me, but I still have a bullet hole in my wall. Actually, it's my daughter's room now. I won't sleep in there. So,
Does
but
it bother your daughter that she's sleeping in a room with a bullet hole?
no, no. I mean, she wasn't attacked in there. I've been attacked in every room of my home.
My God.
So I don't really care for my house anymore. I mean, it's a place for my children for sure, but and then I went to work the next day trying to maintain just my level of sanity that probably wasn't even there. And, came home that night, was fixing dinner. We were supposed to, kind of cook out and chill out. There were no kids at home except for our youngest one. Um, and as the night progressed, he drank more, which, by the way, he was also an alcoholic. And he got madder and madder at me, called my best friend and yelled at her, um, you know, and it just escalated from there because it was something in his mind that was really going on that really wasn't going on. but he was using that to fuel his anger to carry out whatever he was doing. And I really feel like him shooting at me the day prior, he was working up the courage. Hindsight's 2020. He was working up the courage to try and kill me. And we got into an altercation out there because he was screaming at my best friend on the phone. I went to retrieve my phone and said, okay, that's enough. I got struck across the face, and my middle daughter tried to protect me, and my youngest son saw that. So the fact that he beat me in front of my child, that's a felony. But so my middle child, my daughter, got my youngest one out of there, took him to her best friend's house while this is all going on, because he's getting physical and cornering me in places in the house. And then, I noticed that he's, I'm trying to find my youngest, and my daughter calls me and says, I've got him. I'm coming. I'm calling, my oldest, we're calling the police, Mom. This is ridiculous. So meanwhile, he won't let me leave the house. He's cornered me in our bedroom. He's beating me again. He beats me unconscious, to the point where I have a concussion. And now I have a slight traumatic brain injury because of it.
God.
And, and amongst all this, tears my house completely apart.
You think he's an angry guy? You think he has issues? Just a few?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a few.
And then, my oldest son was at a few towns over, raced back because my middle daughter had called him, and he races home and gets in between. By this time I've regained consciousness, but I'm like woozy, not really realizing where I'm at.
How old was your oldest son at this point?
Let's see, it was almost 5 years ago, so 24. And gets in between his dad and I, but on his way home, he had called the police. So the police start showing up after, I leave the house with me and my little dogs. I'm sitting in the car. We're waiting for the police to get there. And you can just hear him in the house just tearing it apart. And I'm sobbing, and I've got little dogs in my lap trying to lick me because I'm crying. And I've got my oldest child sitting there talking to me. My middle child drives up, and then when she drove up, then 4 police cars drive up. And honestly, all I can think of is, oh my gosh, what are the neighbors thinking is going on over here? And one of the officers is talking to me. They go in the house, but he runs out the door. So my abuser decided to flee. And they did catch up with him, and put him in a car away from the house, which I was glad, and took him to jail. Meanwhile, when he decided to flee, my middle child, my daughter, decided, she saw him leaving, told the police officer, and when she did, tried to show him which way that he went, she slipped on my property and hurt her leg or her foot. So I was concerned about her. So the ambulance was there. I refused treatment. I just said, look, I'm going to take her to the ER. Since you guys have him in custody, I'm worried about her leg, not realizing what I looked like. Well, I had bruises and stuff all over me and didn't think about it because that's not where I was concerned with my daughter. So I had to sign a waiver saying I was fine, or I was taking myself to the ER. We get there and they take a look at her and they take a look at me and go, are you okay? And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm bringing her to the ER, not realizing
that you're
that what I look like. And so the police officer that was helping was on the scene. He came over, checked on my daughter, made sure she was okay, and, checked on me. They took me and I had an MRI and different tests ran, and I had a little bit of a bleed on my brain they were concerned about. But they did end up releasing us at about 3 a.m. But after I got back from my brain scan, the officer was still there, and I thanked him for his help. And he said, you realize I have to take pictures now, which is nobody's ever had that done, which I hope not, but that's very humiliating. And he made it as less humiliating as possible. He was very nice about it, but he had to take pictures of me. And I didn't realize that, in the course of our fighting, my ex-husband had spit baked beans all over me. I had bruises. I had, lacerations.
Which was all important for your divorce, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a story in itself. Yeah. But, so he had to take all these pictures, and since my abuser had beat me in front of my child, it became a felony, and it started involving the state, which, went for a while, but they ended up, I don't know, abusers tend to know which attorneys to hire. And this attorney decided to wear the state out to the point where I had to kind of take over, because they were even delaying my divorce by like 20 months. I finally said enough. And I went ahead and pushed the courts to give us a date for divorce, because I waited the mandatory 60 days. I was well over that. And they gave me a date 26 years from the day that I was married as my divorce date. And I had to sit by myself, tell the judge, what went on, that I did no longer wanted to be married. And my abuser sat with his attorney and sobbed. And, the judge divorced us, thankfully. So
But did he ever go for any therapy or anything? What is his story now?
Well, we were apart. I had an emergency protective order, and I had all of that. He kept on drinking, was dating every eligible woman in town, live in a small town in Indiana. So I got to hear about all of it, and left a bar one night because he and a girlfriend of his had fought, and he ran his bike into a telephone pole, just about died because he was drunk, and they ended up amputating his leg.
Oh my goodness.
So he's now disabled because of his alcoholism, but he's a narcissist, and that was not his fault.
Of course. Of course. And you've been in therapy, of course, and you're working on all this, which is so helpful. Is there anything else that you would like to share with those who are listening to us that has been especially helpful to you in your healing journey as you've been moving on?
It's all about safety. You have to do what's good for you, what's safe for you. And, if you feel like you're being abused, and they don't have to lay a hand on you, you're being abused.
Verbal abuse can be just as hurtful as physical abuse, sometimes more.
Bruises heal, words don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, always have somebody that you trust, that you talk over with this. Even if it's just an advocate, they can help you plan safely to leave.
And I'm going to add to that there are, through many parts of the country, battered women's shelters. And with the battered women's shelter, when I worked on that hotline, they even had transitional housing where women who were really fearing to stay in their homes, they had places where they could go that would be protected, because some of these guys were just like, your ex tore up your house. I mean, I would hear horrible stories that went on while the woman was still in the house with the kids and all that. So there was safe transitional housing for them also. What would you tell our listeners? All right, so a girl's going out with a guy, and what should she look for to make sure that this is a benevolent, loving guy with potential to really be her future mate? What are the red flags that you would say that you didn't see when you were dating?
They like to assume everything. They don't ask, hey, can I hold your hand? Can I give you a kiss? They want to move things on very, 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 very quickly. Talk about imminent marriage and things like that, after the first or second date. So you have to really be careful of what's going on there. Watch their body language. I mean, people, whether people realize it or not, tell them exactly what they're going to do. You just have to listen and watch and observe. And now that I'm in the habit of doing that, you can't unsee that. People will tell you exactly what their intentions are if you watch.
If you could also watch the way they treat other people, like a waitress
and animals,
an animal, and any of that. And it might be good to be aware of what their childhood was like. Like you might have, if you'd known now, because you've had therapy, and you heard that the single parent and that she had control issues and all of that that went on, you would have, what's unhealed here? That's
Right.
going on.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Well, now you've moved on to do all these wonderful things, which is incredible. You want to tell us about your social services work, your work as a domestic violence advocate, which you're doing right now by talking with me. And your
Absolutely.
blog called The Walking Wounded, and you're doing public speaking, which you're doing right now. So
Yes.
tell us all about the new Laura.
I blog. I have a blog that I just love writing on. I can write on it anytime I want to. It's called the DV Walking Wounded. I feel like that it's kind of chronicling this side of surviving abuse, because I think when you're in it, it's so hard to know that there's another side, the freedom, the just safety, that you would feel, and all the other emotions that go along with it when you're trying to heal. So I do that.
Let me ask you, to access that, it would be
www.dvwalkingwounded.me.
.me. Okay.
I didn't choose .com. I liked the .me because it happened to me. So
sounds good.
Yeah. And, I work for a federal service organization, and I help people call in all the time. I'm a customer service rep, and I have to, sometimes I have to ask, are you safe? Do you have domestic violence? And do you have an advocate? Would you like the national hotline number? Things like that. Because domestic abuse isn't just interpersonal partner violence. It's, parents and children, elder abuse, things like that. So, working in that environment, I encounter that almost every day. So I do give out resources that way. I have people contact me on Facebook and Instagram and things like that, and I try to help them as much as I can.
It's terrible what happened to you, but it's wonderful that you can help others now.
I try to. That's my goal. If I can help save somebody, at least one person from this, it was worth it. And I also work with a state representative. There was a lady, a local lady. Her name was also Laura. She died at the hands of her abuser. We had the same judge. Our abusers had the same judge, and I was going through a parallel experience as her. Now, he couldn't hold her abuser. He let him out. He went and killed Laura Russell, unfortunately. And I was afraid for my life. I mean, he'd already tried that once. So we're trying to get it to where the judge can hold for more evidence if they feel that's necessary. Unfortunately, it's not going well in this session. They're talking about reviving it next session, which would be January of 2023, but to also work with the Coalition Against Domestic Violence in our state in order to make sure that, this is a horrible phrase, to make sure that all of the verbiage, the legal verbiage, is bulletproof, so that they can, make sure that gets put up front on the docket and gets handled and gets pushed into law. So I'm working with that because that's very close to my heart.
I mean, I wonder how this judge felt when he realized that he let this guy go and he ended up killing his wife.
It made the national news, and I think he did feel bad, but he didn't express it very well. So I don't think he came off as very remorseful. I don't know. I really try not to assume things of anybody because I think ultimately he did not have enough to hold him on. And I understand that aspect too, because you don't know. You can't just go, oh, I have a hunch, I'm just going to keep him. I mean, I suppose judges can do that, but they have to have a legal precedence to keep them on. So if we pass this law, then they can hold them for up to 72 hours for the state to come in and say, hey, we believe that he is dangerous. Here's more evidence.
So that's a good thing that's coming out of your experience, unfortunately, but fortunately, right?
Yes.
I'm going to give everyone who's listening, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. And Laura, if you have any other contact information besides dvwalkingwounded.me, let us know. But the National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-787-3224. And there is also a website called www.thehotline.org. Is there anything you would like to add, Laura?
I also have a Facebook like inspirational page, also called The Walking Wounded. People can get in contact with me that way as well.
Okay, that's great to know. That's really great. So let's hope that no one here needs it, but if you do or whatever, now you have a resource to get on and get support for yourself. And what would you say is your special message about the importance of healing and rebirth that you'd like to share with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience, especially from your background?
Don't lose yourself. And relationships are meant to enhance who you are, not lose yourself in. So if you've got somebody that's trying to lose yourself, that's trying to get you to lose your identity, that's trying to get you away from your family and isolate you, that's a big red flag. So don't ever lose yourself. I lost so many years of myself that, trying to get slowly back and rediscover who I am as a person.
Not only are you rediscovering who you are, but I suspect that some beautiful, wonderful new things are coming out about you as you're healing and you're growing. Right? That you're just, oh wow, you're discovering because you were not allowed to blossom.
Exactly.
In this marriage, right?
Exactly.
And what is the Laura Moseley tip for finding joy in life?
Even the small things, take things that you love. Like I was denied for so long writing. Take the things that you love and do them with great joy and do them, glorifying God and everything good about you. That's my tip for joy.
I have to tell you, I've read some parts of your blog and it's wonderful. And I really recommend people, all of you listening, get on the Walking Wounded blog. She has wonderful things to say. I really got a lot out of it, Laura.
Thank you.
And you're so welcome from my heart. You are an incredible role model for the victims of domestic violence and abuse because you, Laura, found the courage to stand up and say, this happened to me. It was not okay, and I'm not going to allow it anymore. You've been shining your bright light so that others can see that they too can find their way to empowerment, healing, and rebirth. Laura, thank you from my heart for what has been a heartfelt, enlightening, and really touching interview. And here's a reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And be sure to subscribe to Grief and Rebirth podcast on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and hit notify so that you will get all of the inspiring and insightful new interviews like this one with Laura coming your way. And if you would like to be part of this Rebirth series, please send me an email to hello@ireneweinberg.com. As I like to say, to be continued. Many blessings, and bye for now.